Hello, everybody. We are beginning with Techniques of Integration, Webinar Commentaries, number 10 from Esoteric Psychology. Page 363, we're dealing with Ray 4 at this time, the Ray 4 formula for integration. I've been extending these programs just a little bit, sometimes going beyond an hour. I have a couple of 2-hour programs in here. It seems to be maybe the most expeditious way to deal with them, not losing the time in setting up the GoToMeeting program all over again. So hopefully they'll be possible for you to get something out of them at that length. We have finished the first 3 rays, the rays of aspect, and we've done a review on them. Whenever we're considering these formulas, we have to consider the formula as a whole, the initial phase of the formula, which always begins in a non-integrated state, then the perspective of the souls being put forward, then the sounding of the soul word, which brings the man into a new state of action and a new state of relationship with the soul. And then in general, the aclarity process, alignment, crisis, light, revelation, integration, which is different for each ones of the rays. Remembering that this is not a strictly linear process. There may be aspects of overlap going on with it all the time. The phases of alignment and crisis overlapping, crisis and light overlapping, light and revelation overlapping, and so forth, until the stage of integration is achieved. Anyway, moving on now to the 4th ray, and here we are. I will read this Ray 4. Midway I stand, between the forces which oppose each other. Longing am I for harmony and peace, and for the beauty which results from unity. I see the two. I see naught else but forces ranged opposing, and I the one who stands within the circle at the center. Peace I demand, my mind is bent upon it. Oneness with all I seek, yet form divides. War upon every side I find, and separation. Alone I stand and am. I know too much. The love of unity must dominate, and love of peace and harmony, yet not that love based on a longing for relief, for peace to self, for unity because it carries with it that which is pleasantness. The word goes forth from soul to form. Both sides are one. There is no war, no difference, and no isolation. The warring forces seem to war from the point at which you stand. Move on apace. See truly with the opened eye of inner vision, and you will find not two, but one. Not war, but peace. Not isolation, but a heart which rests upon the center. Thus shall the beauty of the Lord shine forth. The hour is now. All right, so let's take a look at this. The midway position, the position between is always the one for the 4th ray, occasionally the one for the 2nd ray, and often the position which those strongly influenced by Libra take. So there are always in our universe, and let us simply confine it to our solar system and planet, the pairs of opposites that are warring with each other. These are especially the vertical pairs of opposites, we can say. Especially the vertical pairs of opposites, like soul and personality, like spirit and matter. The high and the low, especially. But of course also we have the opposites on the right hand and the left hand. For instance, two great oppositions in terms of approach to at least an esoteric goal, I won't call it spiritual, are the right-hand path and the left-hand path. And we have opposites such as male and female, and one cannot look at them in terms of superiors at all. We have rational and intuitive. We have the pairs of opposites that Carl Jung gave us with his intuition and sensation, and thinking and feeling. He considered these to be opposites, and who is to say that one is greater or superior to the other? So we have two kinds of pairs of opposites. But in this particular case, well, I'm trying to think of the great pairs of opposites in the Battle of Kurukshetra, both of whom were members of the family of Arjuna. They were therefore both of them aspects of his own nature. And although they were ranged on the battlefield in a horizontal manner, let us say, they did represent the right-hand path and left-hand path, and therefore they also represented spirit-soul versus the form. Sometimes the horizontal pairs of opposites can be understood in terms of a vertical arrangement. But generally, the real struggle is between the vertical pairs of opposites, and the fourth ray soul is equally drawn at first by tamas and by rajas. Activity is the rajas and inertia is the tamas. And I think, DK says something really interesting here. He says, let's go to approximately page 205. Whoop, that won't do. That was too quick. Let's see if we can find this. Yes. Okay. 205. And here's the fourth ray type. And it says this has been called the ray of struggle because, for on this ray the qualities of rajas, activity, and tamas, inertia, are so strangely equal in proportion that the nature of the fourth ray man is torn with their combat, and the outcome, when satisfactory, is called the birth of Horus, of the Christ, born from the throes of constant pain and suffering. Here we have the hint of how much of the fourth ray we find in Egyptian spirituality and mythology. Tamas induces the love of ease and pleasure, a hatred of causing pain amounting to moral cowardice, indolence, procrastination, a desire to let things be, to rest, to take no thought for the morrow. Rajas is fiery, impatient, ever urging to action. These contrasting forces in the nature make life one perpetual warfare and unrest for the fourth ray man. The friction and the experience gained thereby may produce very rapid evolution, but the man may as easily become a ne'er-do-well as a hero. I think that gives us a strong idea of the nature of the fourth ray individual, and of course the soul is working out in that way as well. I'm going to go here to approximately page 366, and this will be the fourth ray section. All right. So between these warring forces, the fourth ray man, the fourth ray soul, takes his stand. And there is a great love of harmony. Let's just say this is we'll call this the initially the pre-integrative stage. Longing am I for harmony and peace. Generally, when there is harmony, there is peace, because harmony reduces the friction and war is frictional. War is the contending of opposing forces in such a way that each runs the risk of being compromised in the contention. Longing am I for the beauty which results from unity. And this tells us something about artistic perception. Although DK has said the artist is found equally on all the rays, yet we might find that with some fourth ray component, the tendency towards artistry is enhanced, because so often the fourth ray type is known as the artist, just as the first ray type, the occultist, second ray type, the psychic, third ray type, strangely, the magician. All of this is in the destiny of the nations in an important tabulation. Longing am I for harmony and peace, and for the beauty which results from unity. If there is true beauty, there is a certain kind of symmetry, or maybe of a symmetrical asymmetry. There is when the factors united in any gestalt are at odds with each other, when they are not, when the unity is not to be perceived, then beauty, at least in the classic sense, evades us. So beauty in the classic sense evades us when there is no wholeness to the elements brought together. So the longing here is not for war, though, occasionally the fourth ray type is called the warrior and rushes forth into combat. So this particular stanza emphasizes the longing for harmony rather than the longing for battle and conflict, which at different times and under the influence of Rajas, I suppose, is equally strong. So what is the perception here? It's not a perception of multiplicity necessarily, as we find in the third ray, the perception of the many. So in the third ray type, we find the perception of multiplicity, of the many. But here, the perception is especially of the two. I see the two. So there is always a dichotomized vision. And usually these two are not at first in harmony. The differences between the two is what is perceived. Okay. I think that's one word I really should have. So it is the differences between the two differences between the two which are perceived at first, and not the commonalities. Not that which the two have in common or which may be in harmony. So we can call this frictional vision, and the vision of opponents. It's very Martian in a sense, as if Mars is involved in the fourth ray dynamic. But of course Mercury is also called by this name the star of conflict, and Mercury is the active fourth ray planet. So it will be a while before the power of reconciliation can enter. The lower part of the fourth ray is considered the conflicted part. The higher part is considered the harmonizing part, and it is more the eventual state. Conflict is initial, and harmony is eventual. So let's put that down. Conflict is initial, and harmony is eventual. I see naught else but forces ranged opposing. It's rather the Arjuna perception, is it not? Arjuna perception. Perception. There, in the middle of the battlefield and on the side, Arjuna perceives the two hosts, the members of his family preparing for battle on a field. And of course, we're told actually that this battlefield was south of Delhi, and some 4 million years ago. And it has also been suggested by some that we were not just dealing with swords and spears, but with a kind of advanced weaponry that the Atlanteans had developed. It was done in Atlantean times. Well, there are probably many legends about this great battle of Kurukshetra. It is, imagine, a 4 million year old battle whose reputation comes down through history. I don't think we can think of anything comparable to that. Of course, our history is so short-sighted. I see naught else but forces ranged opposing. They are inimical to each other. They definitely intend to contend. And I, and this is the isolated lower ego, the consciousness which sees its identity as the person. And I, the one, not the one with the capital, not the soul, not the soul. If it were the soul, the word one would be capitalized. And I, the one who stands within the circle at the center. Well, this is my isolated position. This is my ahamkaric HAM position. And in a way, I am surrounded by opposites. Without the possibility of synthesis. At least I don't see it that way at first. So the forces are ranged opposing, but if one stands in the center of the circle, everywhere one looks, one will see the opposite. If one looks to the forward, there will be a force opposed to that which is in back of one. If one looks to the left, there will be a force opposed to that found on the right. And in any point on the circle, there will always be the opposition. Of course, this reminds us somewhat of astrology. So we might say that the person feels surrounded. The person feels surrounded by contending forces, and the individual is what you might say in the line of fire. It's both sides in fighting the opposite will fight the individual as well, because he is, as we can say, in the way. So it is often a dangerous place for the peacemaker, or the one who identifies with neither side. Both sides consider him to be a target, because he has not cast his lot with either one of them and is still in an indecisive position. I think we see the Ray 4 and also possibly the Libra quality there as well. I think we were told that the great battle of Kurukshetra took place under the influence of Libra. I'm going to see if I can look that up. Oh, that won't do. K-U-R-U-K. Kurukshetra and Libra. Is there anything there about that? No, there isn't. but I seem to recall it. Is this one of those references imagined? Battle, Libra. Libra, contemplation, the battle for the personality waits, okay. And the great battle, here we go. In the Bhagavad Gita, right, there it is. A study of the Bhagavad Gita and of Arjuna's problem when he sat down, interesting, a kind of a second ray gesture, in despair between the two opposing armies will be found illuminating in connection with Libra. The great battle which is related in the ancient scripture of India really took place in the first instance, maybe there were others, in the mid-Atlantean days and in the sign Libra. All right, there it is. Well, it didn't mention the word Kurukshetra, but at least we understand that Libra was associated with the Kurukshetra because the great battle was Kurukshetra. So this is page 239, and I want to kind of put that in there. Okay. So this is Esoteric Astrology 239, something that we can consider. And I'm going to make this smaller. You know, I oftentimes put them in green and at a lower font, maybe even a much lower font. That's better. Okay. So it's a Libran fourth ray situation, even though from the rays we study concerning Libra, there is no fourth ray coming through it, but of course only the third ray in this world period. But if we really think about it, every great constellational lord certainly has more than one ray ruling the periodical vehicles, whether monad, soul, personality, and so forth, and the other vehicles. So I think we must assume that certainly this great constellational lord has much of the fourth ray connected with it, and especially, I suppose, the harmonizing part of the fourth ray. DK was telling us that there's kind of a repeat of the Battle of Kurukshetra going on right now in the world, only it's being fought out in relation to the sign Scorpio. Peace I demand. This is a gesture of the will. A demand comes from the will. It is not a desire. And my mind is bent upon peace. Well, this augurs well for the harmonizing future. Oneness with all I seek. So this first comes unity. Let's just say in this order: harmony, unity, and oneness. Oneness with all. Oneness with all I seek. Oneness with all I seek. Harmony, unity, leading to oneness. The perception of the unified whole is a final perception for the fourth ray type. The perception of the harmonized, unified whole is a climactic perception for the fourth ray soul. So, in any case, there is the search after this unity. There are a number of unity of rays. The fourth ray is one of the synthetic rays and verges towards synthesis, but only after there has been harmony and unity achieved. In some way, the fourth ray blends with the second ray in the pursuit of unity. So there is the seeking for the ending of friction, we might say. Seeking the ending of friction, and yet the forms which are perceived, and because it's mostly only form, are antagonistic to each other. So this is still in the realm of form perception, and is not in the realm of the perception of the unifying factor, the soul. He says, upon every side, and remember, he is the one at the center of the circle. Well, there are two ways of looking at this. Arjuna can be on the side lines between watching the two armies ready to attack each other, or could be considered to be in the center of the circle. So if it's war upon every side, we remember the position of the individual in the center of the circle, which is at first a point threatened by friction. War upon every side I find, and separation rather than union. In other words, no commonalities are found here. It's just forces inimical to each other. Alone I stand and am, very much like the point at the center of the circle, very much like the point at the center. The feeling of isolation is strong here, as one has not taken sides. I know too much. In other words, I can see the point of view of each of the sides and of all the contending sides, whereas those who contend can see only their point of view. Let's get that right. Their point of view. So there is this ability to identify with the different perspectives and perhaps to see how it might be possible for there to be no war, no contention. But that would require the opposing sides to take into consideration that which the central point knows, and that's quite an educative process. The peacemakers of the world have a lot to do when they go to speak to the contending sides to help them find common ground. Within the peacemaker, the solution is known, and many more possible types of interaction are known, and also the reasons for division are known in greater fullness than either one of the contending sides can know. But then there comes the necessity of informing the members of the contending sides just what they have to gain by seeking peace with each other. It's a bit like that in the personality too. Let's say that when there can be peace, then both the soul and the personality can benefit. The personality is enriched and the soul can complete its mission. A harmonious interaction between the two. It stands to be pointed out that an harmonious interaction between the contending forces is of benefit to both. And this type of benefit is known by the one, not behind, by the one in the middle, in the center, who is separated from the poles, apparently, and at first. So that isolated position, the isolated position is a neutral position, separated from the two poles, but in a way participating in both. Well, now the soul perspective enters here. There is always a statement in these stanzas that appears not to be spoken, but at least offers a higher perspective than the initial perspective in the stanza. See, the initial perspective in the stanza is always that of the personality not yet integrated with the soul. And actually, this is a rather longer one if you look at it. Some of the other stanzas we've gone through have not spent much time in this initial, describing this initial phase, but it's described in quite full detail here. Let's see if I can, no, it seems that, okay, let's get that, 366 or so. 363, maybe that's more like it. Yes, this whole paragraph is about the attitude of the one who has not yet integrated the forces of his nature and who has not achieved integration with the soul, who has not achieved the merging of the soul ray with the personality ray, which comes at integration. So we must remember that the merging of the soul and personality ray comes at integration and following revelation. So anyway, this superior perspective speaks. The love of unity must dominate. Yes, it must. And it is even sought for here, you know. I find, war upon every side I find, alone I stand and am, I know too much. So there is a desire for unity, and indeed it must prevail, but it must be of a specific kind. And love of peace and harmony, let's just say, this is much like saying in stanza 2 that, remember this, the love of love must dominate. And love must dominate. And not the love of being loved. So it's a bit like stating a higher ideal here, but there will be a qualification in a moment. The love of unity indeed must dominate, and love of peace and harmony. These are the higher objectives of the fourth ray type. And we will be having, I do think, an era of peace when the fourth ray souls start to come in. Maybe not initially, but eventually the conflict will work out in harmony. Yet, not the kind of love, not that love, based on longing for relief to the personality, for peace to self, that is to the personality, for unity, because no longer carrying friction creates pleasant surroundings where one is not threatened, not challenged, and rather reinforced by those circumstances which surround one and those people which surround one. So not that love, in other words, not a lower personal kind of love based on non-frictional relations between personalities or between the personality and the environment. In other words, non-friction is not enough. There has to be the love, the peace, the unity must be based on deeper understanding. So there are, many fourth ray types. As long as we can get along with those immediately surrounding us, that is considered to be a satisfactory unity. As long as our personality is accepted as it is and no one is challenging it, as long as we don't have to change and yet others will seek to harmonize with how we are when we don't change, that's just fine with us. So we might say that the longing for relief will be relief from friction and dissonance, which always suggests an irreconcilable two-ness. And when we have two-ness which is not unified, well, even two-ness in general, we have pain. Whenever there is two-ness, the possibility of rending is there. If two forces are contending, there will be eventually perhaps a a tear, a rip. And when there is a tear or a rip or a rent, these are the causes of pain. Dissonance and pain are very closely related. So, yet not that love based on a longing for relief from dissonance, and this should be friction, not fruction, friction, for being undisturbed. In other words, the unredeemed self wishes to remain undisturbed, because disturbance, again, can cause the rending, the tearing, and the consequent pain. I think a study of pain from the psychological angle is needed, and also from the metaphysical and spiritual angle. I think it will always be seen to be based on a condition of two-ness. And we can't want unity, or the sense of being one with each other, in a very personal sense, I think, because it carries with it that which is pleasantness. In other words, the person remains unchallenged. So, because really, the soul and personality are, at first, irreconcilable forces. And the soul energy will not change, will not adapt. So the only way that there can be harmony between the two is for the personality to, so to speak, raise its game, which means to raise its vibration and attune to the higher vibration of the soul. Now, when you're looking at horizontal pairs of opposites, it doesn't really have to be that way. Their adaptation occurs in relation to both. I mean, let's just say it's not that men are supposed to become more like women and women are supposed to become more like men. In other words, there's no winning position. The winning does not occur when men become women and women become men, but there can be a kind of appreciation of the qualities of the other, and an incorporation of the qualities of the other while not changing one's essential identity. The personality does have to incorporate on the vertical axis the qualities of the soul, but the soul need not absorb and become more like the personality. So we can see that reconciliation on the horizontal axis is different because it involves a sharing of qualities, whereas reconciliation on the vertical axis requires that the lower become more like the higher, even though the higher may come to, well, probably already does, understand the tendencies of the lower. So that has to be worked out, but the basic idea is that horizontal reconciliation is different from vertical reconciliation, because vertical reconciliation is always hierarchical, and the superior position of that which is in a hierarchically superior position must be retained. The higher factor must not be compromised, though it certainly can adapt in the offering of energy, or the impacting of the lower with energy. It can adapt in those processes of alteration and impact. It can be very cautious in how it directs energy towards the lower factor, but this does not mean that it will in any way lower its nature to become more like the lower factor. What has to happen, since we're in a position of, well, let's call it monadic retraction, is that the lower has to change its vibratory state, which means has to enter a state of transmutation in order to become more like the higher. So there's a certain kind of love, peace, and harmony which are not allowed in this integration formula, even though there must be the love of unity, peace, and harmony. But these have to be a unity, peace, and harmony of a high quality, and not of a compromised personal quality which demands no change. So now the soul will speak. Again, it is speaking in the lower case, and I've talked about that. Later, we're going to see the soul speaking in the higher case, and yet there's no, as the word goes forth, there's no reason to think that in some of these other stanzas the word going forth is any different from the word going forth in the earlier stanzas. So far, every word that has gone forth has been in the lower case. But I think that for the, is it for the seventh ray? Let's take a look here. Let's see if there is. Yeah, and now look, this is a capital word going forth. The word goes forth from soul to form. I just think this is a editorial uncertainty. So in the case of the fifth ray, it's a capitalized word. In the case of the sixth ray, I don't think the word is mentioned here. No, it is. And it's lowercase. But in the case of the seventh ray, the word is again capitalized. So I just think that this is some kind of editorial decision. It's the same word going forth from soul to form, regardless of the ray. It's the word of the soul. So which way will we have it? Will we have it as the word of the soul, or will we have it as a lowercase aspect of the word of the soul? I don't see any reason to divide here. All right, let's go back right to this one. All right, now let's look at the last, the final. The word goes forth from soul to form. Both sides are one. Now this is from the angle of soul perception. Only the soul can see it this way, because the soul has a higher vantage point, a hierarchical vantage point, and the personality does not. So from the angle that the soul sees, the two sides are part of one process. The two sides, as far as the soul is concerned, are two parts of one process. And from the soul perspective, there is no real war. There is not even any real difference. You know, we have all seen the idea that, or we're familiar with the idea that when you take a stick and the two opposites, let's just say something bendable, like some piece of rubber, and there are apparently two opposites, but when you unite this line and make a circle out of it, let us say, then the opposites unite. So the opposites from the higher spherical circlic point of view are not really different. They are two sides of the same thing, and in fact the opposites do unite. There is no war, no difference, and your position is not one of isolation, because in a way you are part of both, and both are part of each other, and in fact are each other. There is no war, no difference, and no isolation. Sometimes the sixth-ray types may conceive of an eternal war operating between good and evil, but in the universal process of reconciliation, those that embody what is apparently evil, those that embody what is apparently good, are all reconciled in the end because they are of one substance. They are actually one identity, and all is transformed into what the universal purpose deems as necessary for its expression. So there is, let's say, we can summarize this by saying that duality is both apparent and impermanent. It will end. It will end with universal reconciliation. All duality ends with universal reconciliation. And your position of isolation will be emerging position because you are part of both of the forces, which will in fact see themselves as part of each other and will merge into the unity that already pre-exists on the higher planes. We can tell that when we listen to the fourth ray word of power, two merge with one. The one already exists. It's not that the two merging make one. The two merge into the one that already is pre-existing and in which reconciliation already exists. The warring forces seem, so this is it points to the idea of pointing to an incomplete perception on the part of the non-integrated personality. So the warring forces seem to war from the point at which you stand. So this is the idea, is that your position in consciousness is not sufficient to reveal the truth. The warring forces seem to war from the point at which you stand. You are seeing things very, you see things dualistically and not spherically. You see without the power to blend. So move on a pace, which could well mean move up a pace. Move on a pace, in other words, change your position, spiritualize your position, elevate your perspective, and you will have a different vision. Right now, you are seeing with two eyes, and you must learn to see with the unitive eye. The third eye you must see as the third degree initiate sees, when the eye has been truly unified and can be used practically and at will. See truly with the opened eye of inner vision. So there is the Shiva eye, the blue eye, and blue is the color of unity and of unification. See truly with the blue Shiva eye, the eye of synthesis, and you will find not two, but really one. Not war, but the peace of Shambhala. Not isolation, but a heart which is embracing, centralized, and containing of both opposing sides. So there is this ability to see what each side contributes to the whole, which already is, and the role that each apparent side plays within the whole. I mean, the sides, the two apparent sides, are already inherent in the whole. And it's just the limitation of the position in consciousness of the perceiver which prevents the holistic perception and makes it seem as if the two sides are forever different, whereas they are already included, already embraced in a unitive process of wholeness. So the place and value of all within the whole, and even we can say even the necessity of each to the other is perceived. Each is not only a part of the other, but necessary to the other. And so we might say the value to each other of the contending forces is perceived. In other words, how is it that each of the forces really, in the context of wholeness, advantage each other? I sometimes look at the puritanical tendencies of some groups in the world versus the libertarian tendencies, where there appears to be a degeneration of morality. There's kind of a hyper-morality on one side and a degenerating but freer morality on the other, and how each contains a kind of antidote to the other. If some of the liberalism would come into the super-fanatical morality of some groups, and some of the backbone and principle would come into the laissez-faire morality of the other groups, each would benefit. They are simply two perspectives on one field of experience, and they need balancing. Now, of course, in warring with each other, they do begin to achieve a kind of balancing. There's a kind of absorption which occurs. I'm reminded also of how Alexander the Great, a fourth-ray type, first-ray, fourth-ray, when conquering Persia, I've mentioned this before, adopted the Persian ways and began to dress as a Persian potentate. He had absorbed the quality of the opposition. Of course, he had forced much of the Greek ways upon the Persians, but at the same time absorbed their own ways. So he had come to a kind of, in his own psyche, a kind of reconciliation between two apparently opposing forces. So each one of the opposing forces has something that will benefit the other, something the other needs, something without which the whole could not be complete. So each one of the opposing forces has qualities without which the whole could not be whole or complete. And this, of course, is not, in other words, the single eye sees in both forces the following, and it is this: you are necessary to the whole. Now, right now, we have, in our country, in America, we have the Democrats and Republicans, we have the conservatives and the liberals, we have the blue, we have the red. It's a very polarized six-ray country. But the time will come, I think, under the fourth ray, and I think the USA does have a fourth ray mind, and the coming fourth ray will help, that each is carrying a value or a quality needed by the other, and neither one can be complete without the other. So let's say that neither of the contending forces can be complete without the other. So you will see not two, but really one merged in the pre-existing unity. You will find not war, but the peace. And what is peace? It's not just inactivity. It's not the peace of the graveyard. It's not the lack of motion. It is harmonious, mutually reinforcing, mutually supportive interaction. It is the best for all elements through the kind of interactivity which reveals how each needs one and all. So it is the harmony of mutual supplementation. These are, just some kinds of definitions. Of course, there are now these days universities of peace. I think in Costa Rica there's a university of peace, and there will be years of study involving politics and economics and religion and all the different factors of society and the way they are to be helpful and reinforcing of each other. And then also the isolation of the one at the center will end. This one at the center who was in a state of personal isolation, the individual perceived himself as personally isolated because not in a unitive state of consciousness. Okay, PR, perceived, right. But instead a heart and soul, because the heart is the soul, the heart is the soul, which rests upon the center, and in that, this is no longer a center of isolation, but a center of inclusiveness, inclusive of the opposites, I want to call them apparent opposites, and valuing the apparent opposites. Well, even on the vertical line this can be done. There is always, there's the two poles on the vertical line, and then there's the point in the middle, but the whole apparatus is constantly moving upward, so that the central point will become ever inclusive of higher, ever higher, and also of the lower states. So there will be a reaching down and a proportional reaching up from the center, and a drawing all in harmony towards the center. So the point at the center will have a harmonizing effect. Point at the center will have a harmonizing effect instead of an isolated, helpless perception. And then the beauty, we might say the beauty in unity of the Lord, we can say of the soul, or of the logos of the whole, will shine forth, and there will be no obscurity. In other words, harmony will reveal the light. And then, of course, the hour is actually now, because what we understand from the fourth ray type is the ability to live in the present, in the presence and in the present. This is what we understand. Okay, so the hour is now. Now is the moment of unifying the past and the future. The eternal now and the presence appears. Of course, also this overcomes procrastination. There is the tendency of the fourth ray type to procrastinate, but it's not so much about that. It's that always the beauty of the Lord is shining forth in the eternal now. The beauty of the Lord is shining forth in the eternal now, And the intuition speaks in the eternal now. And the fourth ray type is particularly related to the access of the intuition. So it's the ability to see all in harmony at every moment, regardless of the contending forces, and to have the sense that far above, in Shambhala, harmony prevails, and to sense that harmony below and now. Oftentimes these stanzas end with a kind of perplexing statement. In the second ray stanza we had, what mean you by that word? And here we have, the hour is now. This is a piece of advice to the fourth ray type, who is attempting to unify himself with the fourth ray soul. One cannot put this off in terms of procrastination, and always and in every moment this unification exists, we might say that. So that the perception is that in every moment the unification exists. And now instead of always perceiving the difference, the isolation, the war, one perceives sameness, unity, and peace. So this is quite a transference from the earlier stage to the later. What I usually do now is I tend to read the stanza, just making some spontaneous comments, although I've actually really made quite a few already, but I'll just do that, saying a couple of things. Midway I stand between the forces which oppose each other, between the pairs of opposites, whether horizontal and especially in this case the vertical pairs of opposites, and I'm always upholding the midway position, which is neither towards the one or the other, and at first disidentified with both. Feeling that I understand both, but I am different from both. My desire body within my personality longs for harmony and peace, probably for personal reasons at first, and for the beauty which results from unity. When there is discordance of the factors assembled, we do not really have the possibility of beauty, at least beauty in the classical sense. There were certain rules of proportion and beauty in the times of the Renaissance. Perhaps we've changed our tastes now, and some very discordant assemblages can be considered to be beautiful, but not in the classic sense. So all the elements brought together must be in some unified state if their total effect is to be the beautiful. My perception is such that I see only two. Everywhere I look, I see only two, and it's not two that are harmonized, but two that are always opposing. The forces are ranged opposing. I could be between two opposing armies in a more linear sense, or I could be standing in the center of the circle, and in every direction I look, I always see that there's an opposite. I could turn around entirely. I could rotate on my center, as it were, in the center of a circle, and in every direction I looked, I would always be confronted by that which was behind my back, which was the opposite, and which would be considered to be pulling in the opposite direction. But I'm frustrated by this situation, and I have the will to peace. This is one of the great types of will of the fourth ray soul, even though it might be operating in a personal context at first. So I insist upon this, and I'm going to work very hard to create it. My soul and my mind are bent upon it. The origin of this impulse comes from the soul, but it affects my mind, it affects my desire body, and in my personality I wish for peace, and in my higher nature I will for peace. and the willing of peace will increase in its power and effectiveness. In fact, as a person in the midst of all this, I seek oneness. I do not want to be at odds with anybody. I do not want to be in friction with anybody or anything. Yet as I look at it, the forms are so constituted that they cannot help but war with each other. I do not see any points of reconciliation within the forms I perceive. They seem oppositional. So war is my entire perception. I find war on every side, and the opposites are going for each other to enter into conflict. They are not approaching each other with the laurel, with the gesture of peace. So the two are separated in my perception. And I am in the middle of it all, and I stand alone because I am identified entirely with neither one. I have not taken sides, and I never can take sides, because I see the value of both. And this reminds one a little bit, let victory crown the efforts of the blessed ones by harmonizing all. So I feel isolated. I have a central isolated position from every point on the periphery of the sphere, on the circumference of the sphere, because no matter what point I see, it always has an opposing point, and I am identified fully with neither and see myself as different from both. So I'm isolated along all 360 degrees of the circle. I know too much. I know more than the forces that simply want to attack and kill each other and annihilate each other. I know how they could be reconciled, and they don't. And yet I'm powerless. I do not have the power to bring them together. However, if I had the power of the soul, perhaps I would have the power to bring them together, just as the Blessed One eventually can. So the word comes forth to me, or at least I am paused, and I begin to understand a higher perspective, or I am being admonished by something that does have the higher perspective. The love of unity must dominate, bringing all different factors together into a wholeness or a oneness. This must dominate. And the love of peace and harmony, these must be dominating factors in my consciousness. But there's an admonition here. It may not be the way I think as a personality, not at all. It can't be the kind of love which is based on my personal desire for the ending of friction, which makes me uncomfortable. It's not love to produce comfort for me. So the relief from friction and dissonance, no, that's not the reason for the love. So that I will not be disturbed in the way I am, even if I'm unwilling to change, that's not the reason for the love. And for the pleasant interaction which has no pressure within it, no pressure upon me to change, because when I'm unified with my surroundings, there's no pressure put upon me to be other than I am. And that's not the reason for the love of unity, the love of peace, and the love of harmony. There has to be a deeper reason why the love of unity must dominate, the love of peace and harmony, because true peace, harmony, and unity are far beyond the personal variety of the same. All factors within the whole have to be considered, and not simply my own physical, emotional, and mental comfort. My desire to remain in a non-disturbed, unchallenged state, this cannot prevail. I cannot make peace with the part and yet not with the whole. So then the soul is going to speak. The soul is a word, and a word goes forth from the soul as well. From the soul to form, the higher of the pairs of opposites speaks with the lower. Both sides, really, if you could see clearly, are one. You do not perceive clearly, you perceive in an illusory manner under the spell of duality. But from my perspective, I, the soul, the higher part of yourself, there is really no contention of the forces, because they are all part of a peaceful process, a balancing process. Without these forces, there would be no true peace. There is no difference. They're all involved in a sameness of identity. And there is no isolation for you, because you're part of everything. You're part of both forces, and they are parts of each other. And without these apparently opposing forces, the whole could not exist. So these warring forces, there's a seeming here based upon your illusory perception. They seem to war from the point at which you stand, which is a limited state of perception, a state of personal perception. You need soul perception. So move forward from where you are, which is the same as raising your vibration. Move on a pace is like move upward. Raise your vibration and enter into a more unitive perspective, and see truly not with the two eyes of duality, but begin to use your inner eye, which sees all in unification, all as parts of one thing. And when you can use the third eye around the period of your own initiation into the third degree, you will find not two, that there have never been two, but only one, with different supplementary aspects. There's never been war, but there's always been an underlying peace that comes from the necessary interaction of the apparently different parts. So from the shambolic point of view, all of these interacting factors are necessary, and the true peace and balance requires every one of them. Not isolation, with you as the apparently isolated center of the whole process, and different from every other point on the circumference of the sphere or circle, but in fact you yourself, as you embrace the sphere with your heart and soul, are every other point as well. You are the contending forces, and you are the forces which are really necessary to each other to create the wholeness. So there's never been isolation, really, but from this higher perspective, you will see that in your soul and consciousness nature you embrace all the opposites and understand the necessity for them, and see them all as part of one balancing, peace-creating process. So the heart in the center is the perfect place to give every force its proper due, its proper recognition, its proper valuation. You are in an unbiased position. You are not leaning towards one or the other, but you are valuing all contending forces and seeing how, in fact, they don't really contend at all, but actually supplement each other. Thus, because of this great harmonization, and because of what you can now perceive, the beauty of the Lord will shine forth. It's always been shining forth, but now it shines forth in your unitive consciousness as you perceive it. And when does it shine forth? Do you have to wait for it? No. You don't have to wait for it, because it's always shining forth, at least on the archetypal planes. The hour is now when the shining forth is occurring, because you can see in the eternal now how all of these factors are related. You don't have to wait for peace in some linear sense. The one with which the two merge already exists. The peace into which the warring forces blend already exists. The peace of Shambhala already exists, and that peace is also perceived to an extent within the realm of the soul. So these are the coming forth ray souls, and this will apply to them, and also these stanzas, of course, apply to a degree to personalities on this ray. There's no question about it. But remember that the integrative task, or the integrative process, is impulsed by the soul. It applies these techniques to the personality at a certain point in the personality life when the process of integration is on the move. So now let me read this. Ray 4. Midway I stand between the forces which oppose each other. Longing am I for harmony and peace, and for the beauty which results from unity. I see the two, I see naught else but forces ranged opposing, and I the one who stands within the circle at the center. Peace I demand, my mind is bent upon it. Oneness with all I seek, yet form divides. War upon every side I find, and separation. Alone I stand and am. I know too much. The love of unity must dominate, and love of peace and harmony, yet not that love based on a longing for relief, for peace to self, for unity because it carries with it that which is pleasantness. The word goes forth from soul to form. Both sides are one. There is no war, no difference, and no isolation. The warring forces seem to war from the point at which you stand. Move on apace. See truly with the opened eye of inner vision, and you will find not two but one, not war but peace, not isolation, but a heart which rests upon the center. Thus shall the beauty of the Lord shine forth. The hour is now. So what we have here really, well, if there's such a word, we have kind of the sphericizing of all apparently contending points on the sphere. Every point on the sphere has its exact opposite. Every point on the circumference, has its exact opposite, and all points are necessary to each other. And this is seen by the one at the center, whose heart has opened through the opening of the third eye, the opening of the eye of the soul. The embracing heart and the encompassing eye have revealed a great peaceful process underlying all apparent contention seen from a dualistic perspective of the limited consciousness of the personality. So this is the end of Techniques of Integration webinar commentary number 10, and I think we just really only dealt with one page here. I think, yes, it's page 363. Dealing with just one page. Esoteric Psychology 2, page 363, and beginning of Techniques of Integration webinar commentary, EP2, page, it's going to be Techniques of Integration webinar commentary number 11. I find myself having to discontinue this one at this point, and I will go on shortly. This is a program of some 1 hour and 18 minutes, approximately an hour and 20 minutes. And I'll put that down, 1 hour, 20 minutes. And I think the thing to do now will be to do the great invocation together. We'll do that. Right. All right. So, from the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay, friends, that'll be it then, and we will go on with number 11 and continue with the rest of the techniques of integration, the Tibetan, number 4, the Tibetan's explanation of this. And we'll see you soon.